The wind howled through the streets of Outpost Meridian, carrying with it the bitter cold of a planet that had never been meant for warmth. Luma Solon dragged herself forward, her small paws leaving crimson trails in the fresh snow. The gash across her shoulder burned with every movement, and her fur, once a pristine silver that shimmered under moonlight, was now matted with blood and ice. She was dying. She knew this with the certainty that came from being only 7 cycles old and already understanding too much about the cruelty of the universe. The first door she reached belonged to a Krillian merchant. Luma pressed her trembling paw against the entry panel, her claws scraping weakly. The door remained shut. Through the frosted window, she could see the merchant glance toward the sound, his compound eyes registering her presence for barely a heartbeat before he turned away, adjusting the temperature controls to drown out the noise. The second door was a Vexorian dwelling. Luma scratched harder this time, mewing in the ancient tongue of her people, a sound that carried desperation across species. The Vexorian child inside pressed their face to the glass, curiosity lighting their features. But then came the parent, pulling the child away, sealing the door with an audible click of magnetic locks. 3, 4, 5. Each door was the same. Some species pretended not to hear. Others looked directly at her with eyes that held calculation rather than compassion, eyes that weighed the cost of involvement against the currency of indifference. On a frontier world like this, everyone had their own problems. A wounded alien cub with no credits and no family was simply another statistic waiting to freeze in an alley. By the 7th door, Luma's vision had begun to blur. The cold was seeping into her bones, past the point where shivering helped. She had left her colony world after the raid, the same raid that had killed her parents and scattered her siblings across the stars like seeds that would never take root. She'd stowed away on a transport, desperate and alone, only to be discovered and thrown off at the first stop. This miserable, half-frozen outpost on the edge of civilized space. The 8th door belonged to another of her own kind. For a moment, hope flickered in Luma's chest. Surely, one of the Solon would help. But the adult Solon who appeared in the doorway looked down at her with ears flattened in disgust. "We have no room for strays," they said in the clicking language of their people. "Especially not refugees. You bring trouble." The door sealed shut before Luma could even respond. 9, 10, 11. Her legs were giving out now. Each step required a negotiation with muscles that no longer wanted to obey. The snow beneath her had turned pink, then red, then a deep crimson that steamed in the frigid air. She didn't know where she was going anymore, only that stopping meant death, and something in her refused to surrender to that darkness just yet. The 12th door was a medical clinic. Surely here, she thought. Surely those who had sworn to heal would not turn away the dying. But the Theshan doctor who answered took one look at her and shook his head. No credits, no treatment. Galactic Medical Accords, Section 7, Paragraph 3. I cannot provide services without verification of payment or sponsorship. Please, Luma managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. I'm just a cub. Then where are your parents? Your guardians? Your colony representative? The doctor's tone wasn't cruel, merely administrative. This was business. This was protocol. I'm sorry, small one, but there are procedures. The door closed with a soft hiss of pressurized air. Luma collapsed against the wall beside the clinic, no longer able to stand. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, each one a little weaker than the last. Through half-closed eyes, she could see the lights of the outpost stretching out before her, a constellation of warmth and life that existed just beyond her reach. How strange, she thought, that in a settlement of 10,000 souls, there wasn't a single one willing to help her survive. But there was one more door. She hadn't noticed it at first, a small dwelling tucked between 2 larger structures, easy to overlook. The exterior was different from the others. Where most buildings on the outpost were sterile prefabricated units, this one had been modified with wooden panels and actual plants growing in containers despite the cold. Through the window, warm yellow light spilled out into the darkness. Luma didn't remember crawling to that door. She didn't remember raising her paw one final time to scratch against the surface. She only remembered thinking that this was where she would die. Door number 13, unlucky in so many cultures, fitting for an unlucky cub. The door opened. A human stood there. Luma had heard of humans, of course. Everyone had. They were the newcomers to the galactic community, the odd species from a little blue world that had somehow clawed their way to the stars despite lacking any of the advantages other species had evolved. No natural armor, no enhanced senses, no telepathy or electroreception or quantum awareness. Just determination and an unsettling tendency to pack bond with anything that moved. This human was female, dressed in worn thermal clothing, with dark hair pulled back from a face marked by laugh lines and scars in equal measure. Her eyes, strange forward-facing predator eyes, went wide as she saw Luma. "Oh, sweet stars," the human breathed, and her voice carried something Luma hadn't heard in any of the other 12 encounters. Genuine horror at suffering, in one fluid movement. The human, Celine Kale, Luma would learn later, scooped her up with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a species known for their strength. The warmth of human body heat was shocking against Luma's frozen fur. "It's okay, little one. I've got you. You're safe now." Celine carried her inside, and the door sealed shut behind them, cutting off the wind and cold. The dwelling was small but lived in, filled with the kind of comfortable chaos that spoke of a solitary life lived deliberately. Celine laid Luma on a soft surface, a couch, human furniture, and immediately began stripping away her own coat to wrap around the cub. "Stay with me," Celine murmured, already reaching for a medical kit that looked far more comprehensive than any civilian should own. "What's your name, sweetheart? Can you tell me your name?" "Luma," she managed, her voice a ghost of itself. "Luma Solon." "Luma, that's beautiful. I'm Celine, and I promise you, Luma, you're going to be okay." Celine's hands moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound, applying coagulants, wrapping bandages. But it wasn't just the medical treatment. It was the running commentary, the soft reassurances, the way she never once asked about payment or guardians or legal documentation. She simply saw a child who was hurt and responded with the kind of instinctive compassion that Luma had thought extinct in the universe. 12 doors, Luma whispered as Celine worked. "I knocked on 12 doors." Celine's jaw tightened, her hands pausing for just a moment. When she looked at Luma, there was something fierce in her eyes, something that made Luma understand why other species sometimes feared humans. "Then they're all fools," Celine said quietly. "Because humans learned a long time ago that civilization isn't measured by our technology or our territory. It's measured by how we treat the most vulnerable among us. And any society that can ignore a wounded child isn't civilized at all." She returned to bandaging the wound, then prepared a warm broth that she helped Luma sip slowly. The cub's body began to thaw, and with warmth came pain, but also the first stirrings of hope. "What?" Luma asked, when she could speak more clearly. "Why did you help me when no one else would?" Celine smiled, and it transformed her scarred face into something radiant. "Because that's what humans do, little star. We see someone in need, and we help. It's not always logical. It's not always profitable, but it's who we are. We've been the underdog, the outcast, the refugee. We remember what it's like to need help and have nowhere to turn." She gently stroked Luma's head, her fingers careful around her ears. "And besides, you knocked on my door. That makes you my responsibility now. That's how pack bonding works." Luma didn't understand pack bonding yet, not fully. But as she drifted into the first safe sleep she'd had in weeks, wrapped in warmth and safety in the home of a human who had asked for nothing except the chance to help, she began to understand something else. That perhaps humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their tenacity, that it was their ability to open the 13th door.